Okay, efficiency.
Just kidding.
Okay, just because we got to go and I want to get to this. Efficiency, what else could it mean?
It means using time and energy wisely.
Okay, so actually people have a good definition of efficiency generally. So efficiency means accomplishing a stated objective without wasting what you value. So for our economy to be efficient, it shouldn't violate or destroy, completely obliterate the development of these other values. So that's what I would argue criteria for efficiency would be. Of course, capitalism has a completely different series of values. So capitalism, efficiency means something entirely different, right? Accomplishing a stated goal, maximizing profit without wasting what you value, which is also profit. And that we have a responsibility to ensure that human civilization does the least damage possible and that we preserve our planet for future generations. Again, so I think all of these values, most people, especially people who are not directly engaged in the massive accumulation of profit and the destruction of human life, would definitely agree that, yes, these sound great. Solidarity, equity, diversity, self-management, efficiency, ecological balance. That sounds great, but whatever. It's not possible. You can't do that. You can't have a society. People are inherently competitive. People are incapable of coordinating their interrelated activities effectively. Free market capitalism does it best. It just is hands down the best, most efficient system, and it is. It might not be the most fair, but it's just the best. And we would say, no, that's ridiculous. Here's why capitalism is bad, and here's the values we have. But do we have institutions that we favor that would enforce these, that would cultivate them in a society, and that would see a society characterized by solidarity, equity, diversity, self-management, efficiency, and ecological balance, instead of the endless pursuit of profit and complete disregard for our natural environment and human life? Do we generally share that? Why we're having this conference? Absolutely not. We don't share this, and that's why I use the example is a little silly of when I mentioned if I were to come up to here and describe a process, a system that destroyed human life, was abominable, is oppressive, it crushes the human soul, and then I would say, and join me in the movement against aging, you would think that I was crazy. Why? Because aging is just a part of life. You can't fight aging any more than you fight gravity. And that's what most people hear when they hear anti-capitalists, radicals, self-proclaimed revolutionaries critique a system, advance a series of values, but then provide absolutely no institutional form through which those values could be cultivated, let alone a path of struggle, a trajectory to pursue through which we could get from here to there, which certainly is and will inevitably be a long road. Okay. So, core institutions, I'm going to go through them, ask for any questions, and then I'd really like to get to questions about strategy and tactics and struggle, and that's social ownership of the means of production. Private ownership of the means of production is what we have under capitalism, which pretty much violates all of those values. It violates solidarity because it creates a class division based on those who own and those who have to sell their ability to work in return for a wage. And it puts those who own in a position of authority, meaning they can determine the pace of work, the length of the workday, and the wage that you receive. It violates equity because you're accruing profit without working. Essentially, capitalists are parasitic, right? They have a piece of paper, which means they get lots of money. We work, we get the scraps that are decided or based on what we can take, right? So bargaining power. Diversity, self-management, efficiency, ecological balance. I'm not going to go through each one, but essentially I'd argue that social ownership of the means of production is the only alternative to private ownership of the means of production in the long term, if we actually want to see these values come into fruition and to overturn the existing system. And people can ask questions about that in a little bit. Grassroots councils of workers and consumers. Here's where we can mix in a little bit more history. Pretty much universally, across the board, almost any time working people have organized and risen up against their conditions under capitalism for more than 200 years now, people have formed what they've been called different things. They've been called councils, assemblies, etc. But they've formed what I'll call grassroots councils of workers and consumers, both as vehicles of winning certain objectives and as a prefiguration of the new type of democratic economic life that the new society would embody. What is a council? It's an assembly. We're a workplace, and this is our workers' council. How do we make decisions within our workplace? Under capitalism, I'm the owner, and I appoint you the manager, and you figure it out. You decide who works what wages they get, etc. Under a system of workers' councils, workers meet in their work teams or on an industrial level or across industrial level, and would decide what appropriate levels for output are, pace of production, quality of work, etc. And similarly, consumers would meet in their blocks, their neighborhoods, municipalities, and states. Essentially, a federated economic democracy is what we're talking about, in which consumers make proposals regarding their economic needs. We need parks, we need more schools, we need more teachers, we need more coffee, etc. And workers say, we can produce more parks, we have the resources to do that, we can meet that demand. We don't have that much coffee, etc. There's a negotiated process that I'm not going to convince you is feasible at this moment, but I'd like you to trust me that based on historical experiences from workers in the Spanish Civil War to the Paris Commune of 1871 to even the history of America today, in which there are examples of workers' cooperatives in which through assemblies, workers democratically decide upon, albeit in a context of a market economy, but they decide for their individual workplace appropriate levels and pace of production, quality of work, etc. So instead of it being a dictatorship, it becomes workplace democracy and an economic democracy. Balanced job complexes is a wordy way of saying that work should be shared across society. In other words, that's, like I was saying, some people, it's in our, under capitalism, you have a corporate division of labor in which some perform crap work all the time for low wages, and others perform very empowering work and control the labor of others. Instead, that work should be shared and generalized across society. And basically, everyone should perform a job that has a mix of empowering and rote tasks. And the incentive that this creates within society is that rather than people never, it destroys the barriers that capitalism creates between the difficult, rote, disempowering, destructive work, say, of working in a coal mine, or the boring work of mopping floors every night as a janitor, or, et cetera. You can think of a number of forms of work that are less than empowering and that remain the work for a certain section of people, a certain section of workers. Instead, that work should be generalized and shared across society, and new opportunities should be opened up. Remuneration for effort, sacrifice, in certain cases need. People who can't work should simply be remunerated for being a human being. Capitalism does this to some degree, but it condemns them ultimately to a life of poverty and struggle, despite the fact that they perhaps have disabilities. The elderly, the elderly used to be in some ways provided for, but essentially are no longer. They also have to work, and children also, child labor around the world. There's been a massive reversal of that. So essentially, children, the elderly, the disabled, and others who, for whatever circumstances, are incapable of working should simply be provided for because they are a person and we value human life. However, for those of us who are able to work, I believe we should be remunerated according to effort and sacrifice. Why? Because it's the only thing that we have control over, right? Should we be remunerated because should I be remunerated because I have a piece of paper that gives me the deed to a factory, and I can hire you all for really low wages, and I get all the profit that you generate?
Well, no.
No, of course not. I would hope not. But there's other more subtle things. One is bargaining power. Should I be able to take what I can get? Or get what I can take, rather. The answer, I would hope, is, well, under capitalism, kind of, because as workers we should band together and we should, take whatever we can get from the capitalists. But in terms of as a social norm, that's not a very desirable way of an economy functioning. It's of necessity under this system, but instead, I think we would want to reject bargaining power as a norm by which people are remunerated. There's one more subtle norm. Well, there's two. One, the traditional left norm, from each according to ability to each according to need. I put in what I can, I take what I can, what I need. The problem with that is, as a general social goal, vaguely articulated, it sounds fine, but I need a swimming pool and 2 Ferraris and 4 houses. and you don't need that. I just need it. I need it.
3 or 5.
Okay, good. Well, I hope we would dismiss need as well, because it's not dismissive, but rather find a more fine articulation of it, because need could mean one of two things. It either means my criteria for need, or it means some basic subsistence, which why would we want to opt for that? We want something more than that. So we need a further articulation of what it means to have a society that meets people's needs, and their wants and desires as well. So one proposal that was traditionally advanced was output. I produce 5 units, I get 5 units back. You produce 3 units, you get 3 units back. But you and I are working in an orange field. We're working the same number of days for the same amount of hours under the same onerous conditions, utilizing the same tools. You produce 400 units of oranges at the end of the day, I produce 100. Should you be remunerated more than me? Is the example clear? We're both working, same amount of time, same number of days. We're being remunerated for how much we produce.
You should have been given better trees.
What's that? Better trees. Well, let's say
I take
equality
crops for a living. So
Yeah. Well, let's think. I mean, there's other examples we could think of. I'm
We're
sure.
assuming the difference in how much is produced is due because of chance.
I'm scrawny and
Slump. You're the wedge and he's a wimp.
yeah.
But you're both out there working
I
8
thought
hours a
maybe
day and
one
you're both
tree,
focused
group
on
of
what
trees
you're
had
doing.
more oranges.
No. Say equality.
If you were an efficient
Context.
manager, you would have hired him as a picker and you as a sorter.
Let's say that work is. Well, I think that there should be a different solution. That those tasks should perhaps be balanced within that workplace between picking and sorting and shared. And there's also, but just in this little closed example, which clearly I'm setting up for this.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to illustrate is that output's not always fair. Output's not always fair because, for example, you have perhaps more ability. Why should we, in addition to you having that ability, but we both worked expended the same amount of effort under the same conditions, why should you receive more? Ultimately, instead, we should have effort and sacrifice as our criteria. By this criteria, who should receive more? A doctor, a surgeon who's works hard, studied hard to get where she is, and spend some time on the golf course or swimming or whatever during the week. Or a coal miner works, say, same number of days, but under clearly different conditions, different type of work, different level of effort necessitated, etc.
Coal mines should get more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, or the janitor, you could say that
Yeah.
if you didn't want
Well, I
to
mean,
spread out the menial labor.
well, that's why we should. But we should spread out
But
the
is that
manual labor.
efficient? The question is,
What is efficiency?
Is that efficient to give
Does
it
it-
so you mop for a half an hour a day rather
What's
than
efficiency?
keep? I mean, that may be a good idea. I'm not sure that it is.
Well, I mean, it's
Although you could pay the mopper more.